Something felt off the moment Donald Trump smiled for the cameras. For months, he'd been calling Canada weak, naive, and too dependent on American trade. And yet here he was, shaking Prime Minister Mark Carney's hand, showering him with praise, and promising a beautiful deal. What changed? Behind that grin was a man who had been cornered by his own policies. After months of economic warfare, Trump wasn't negotiating from strength. He was begging for a way out. And the quiet, composed Canadian economist standing across from him had just called his bluff. It started as a show of power. Trump's 35% tariffs on Canadian goods, 50% on steel and aluminum, and 25% on automobiles. He called it America First, but economists around the world called it what it really was, a self-inflicted wound. Canada's unemployment rate climbed. Manufacturing slowed. But in the U.S., something worse happened. Prices soared. American companies that relied on Canadian steel, aluminum, and energy began drowning in higher costs. Truck makers in Michigan, builders in Ohio, small manufacturers across Wisconsin. Trump's tough trade war was squeezing his own voters. And when the data came in, it told a humiliating story. His tariffs weren't saving jobs, they were destroying them. That's when the showman tried something new. He swapped the threats for charm.
5 months after their first IC meeting, Carney returned to the White House. The cameras rolled. Trump grinned.
Mark's a great guy, a tough negotiator, a world-class leader. He spoke about love between the two countries. A man who had spent a year insulting Canada was suddenly speaking like a romantic diplomat. But Canadians saw right through it. Behind closed doors, Trump's team had one goal: get Canada to sign anything that made him look victorious before the next election cycle. What he didn't realize was that Carney had already decided he wouldn't play that game. While the European Union and the UK had both signed quick deals to escape Trump's tariffs, Canada was the only G7 nation that refused to cave. Carney knew the truth Trump couldn't admit. Canada held the stronger hand. Every day, $2.5 billion worth of goods crossed the U.S.-Canada border. Canada isn't just America's neighbor, it's America's lifeline. 60% of U.S. crude oil imports come from Canada. 85% of imported electricity, Canadian. The Pentagon's supply of uranium, aluminum, and 34 critical minerals, also Canadian. Without Canada, America's energy grid would flicker, and its factories would grind to a halt. So when Trump slapped those tariffs, he wasn't punishing a rival. He was destabilizing the very supply chain that powered his own country. Carney understood that perfectly. He didn't need to shout, threaten, or grandstand. All he had to do was wait. And as American industries started cracking under their own tariffs, Trump's tough guy mask began to slip. In public, Trump rambled about a natural conflict between neighbors, how Canada wanted car companies, and he wanted them too. How both sides were competing for steel, for markets, for power. But buried beneath those words was something new: insecurity. Trump was no longer the master of the deal. He was the man trying to explain why his plan wasn't working. Carney, meanwhile, stood there calm and collected. He thanked Trump, praised the spirit of cooperation, and reminded everyone that Canada stands foursquare behind peace and diplomacy. In just a few lines, Carney flipped the dynamic. Trump looked flustered and uncertain. Carney looked like the adult in the room, and when reporters pressed Trump about lifting tariffs, he dodged the question. "We'll see," he muttered, "but I think the people of Canada will love us again." Love us again. That wasn't the language of strength. That was the sound of a man trying to rebuild a relationship he'd destroyed. While Trump was busy tweeting threats, Carney was playing chess. He quietly removed a few of Canada's retaliatory tariffs, scrapped a digital tax aimed at U.S. tech companies, not as surrender, but as strategy. Each move made Canada look like the reasonable partner, while Trump looked increasingly erratic. Inside Washington, even Trump's advisors noticed the shift. One trade official described it as the most positive tone we've ever seen from him. Translation? Trump was trying to please Canada. Carney had achieved the impossible. He'd made the world's loudest negotiator dance to his tune. And yet, Carney didn't boast. He knew the real game was still ahead. The USMCA review in 2026, where Canada's cooperation would decide the fate of Trump's trade legacy. So while Trump smiled for the cameras, Carney was already thinking 10 moves ahead.
For Trump, the problem wasn't just economic. It was personal. His entire brand was built on being the deal maker, the guy who could crush enemies with pressure and charm allies with promises. But now, the world saw something else. A desperate man trying to rewrite his own narrative. Even Canada's opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, mocked Carney for not securing an immediate deal. But what Poilievre missed was the subtle genius of the move. Carney didn't need to come home with a signed paper. He needed to prove Canada couldn't be bullied. And he did exactly that. Trump couldn't escalate without hurting American voters. And he couldn't retreat without looking weak. He was trapped, and everyone knew it. In one meeting, Carney had turned Trump's trademark strategy against him. As Trump's trade war dragged on, the rest of the world moved forward without him. The European Union signed new trade partnerships. Asia expanded its Pacific alliances. And Canada quietly became the dependable partner everyone wanted to work with. America, once the center of global trade, was now the unpredictable player everyone avoided. The phrase "America first" had become America alone. Carney's calm leadership gave Canada something priceless: trust. While Trump's threats scared investors, Carney's discipline attracted them. Foreign companies started redirecting projects north, preferring stability over chaos. The irony was breathtaking. Trump's tariffs, meant to punish Canada, had turned it into one of the most attractive economies in the West. By the time Carney's plane left Washington, the power balance had shifted. Trump had started the trade war believing he could bend Canada's will. He ended it trying to save his own reputation. Carney didn't yell, insult, or threaten. He didn't need to. He simply waited for Trump's own strategy to collapse under its contradictions. Trump may have built his empire on bluster, but Carney built his influence on patience, and that's what won. The world just watched a quiet Canadian economist outplay the loudest man in global politics. And in doing so, he exposed something much bigger than tariffs. He exposed the end of bully diplomacy. Because in today's world, real strength doesn't roar. It strategizes, adapts, and wins with silence.